Hey, good afternoon. Great to see all of you here. I'm José Aissa, and I'm delighted to be sharing this short talk with you. Great afternoon, great event that SBS was able to put together with great speakers, but especially a very, very, very wonderful audience. I would like to start by actually thanking SBS, but also thanking National Geographic Learning for inviting me so as to represent them here. And this is priceless. I mean, if you consider NGL and National Geographic Learning and the importance they have in the world, I think I am indebted for the rest of my life. So thank you, National Geographic Learning, for your trust, which, as I said, is priceless to me. We're here to talk a little bit about getting a little help. As I said in the morning, if you were able to attend our session in the morning, I remembered while I was thinking about what to talk about, what another morsel of food for thought could I actually provide you with. And then I heard the song by the Beatles, you know, I get by with a little help from my friend or my friends. And then I thought, that's exactly what we need in education. We need a little help. We need to provide a little help. And then I thought I would title the presentation, Oh, I Get By With a Little Help from My Teacher, who is certainly more than a friend in this context, right? That's scaffolding, after all. And that has a lot to do with Vygotsky, of course, when we talk about the zone of proximal development. And that's what I would like to work on with you today. Okay, all right. But first, let's start with this short video. I have a few videos today. And let's start with this real life video with this very famous tennis player. Let me play this first. I'll play a short piece, a short passage. Then I'm going to ask you a question. I'm not assessing you. It's just for us to be on the same page, really, about what scaffolding might be.
Roger, I know it's not the way that you wanted to have won this match, and I'm sure you'd like to start with a word about your opponent, first of all.
Yeah, I mean, it's awful. It shows that one shot can change the outcome of a match, a season, a career. So I wish him all the best, and I hope he recovers quickly so we see him back on the courts because, look, he could have won the match at the end. Obviously, he was the better player, so I definitely got a bit lucky, but who cares about that? So I wish him all the best.
As always, a very honest appraisal from you. So with that in mind, how pleased are you to end up with the victory today?
I mean, not like this, please, you know, but I don't know, that's how it goes sometimes. You know, you don't get many walkovers throughout a career, and you try also not to have it happen to yourself, and it's a reminder how quickly it goes. But of course, you know, I'm obviously happy I can get another chance for another match here. I worked very hard, and look, at the end, I enjoyed myself out here today. It was great fun until the end, obviously.
Okay. Do you think Roger has any problem with English? You can type your answers in the chat box. I can take a look at the answers. He seems quite fluent, right? So he doesn't seem to have a problem understanding, and he doesn't seem to have a problem expressing himself. Not really. Okay, yeah, that's the idea. Okay, now let me move a little forward here, and let's see here.
Line a little bit more than the other, but you know,
okay,
adjust my game more than he had to, and that was credit to him, of course.
And Roger, the final thing is it true what they say about absence making the heart grow fonder, being back here?
Well, then the reporter, the journalist, asked him, is it true about, absence making the heart grow fonder? Now, look at his reaction.
Sorry, I didn't understand it. I heard something absence, and then, I don't know, my mind went blank.
Is it true what they say about absence making the heart grow fonder and being back on centre court?
I don't understand that saying. My English is not good enough.
Fair enough. So, basically, having missed out last year, having been away from this place for 2 years, how special is it to be back here on centre court?
Yes, there you go. A good reminder, my English is not very good, but it's
better than mine.
No.
Okay, what we see here, what happened? So, the journalist used a saying which he was not familiar with. He didn't know. And then what did the journalist have to do? He had to scaffold for the tennis player to understand the real message. That happens in real life. Why should it not happen in the classroom, which is the right place for things like that to happen, since learning is actually happening everywhere, but certainly it's happening in our classrooms. So why don't we specialize? Why don't we pay very close attention to scaffolding, to helping, and therefore, as facilitators, we're actually performing the right mission we have as teachers. This is just to give you an example of a real life situation. Someone who seems to be very proficient in English, at least for in his profession and in his relationship with the world. But there are things in real life that really require scaffolding. And this brings me to the idea that in the classroom, we have these quadrants are very interesting because, we always have the idea of support and challenge. If we have very low challenge and very low support, we're going to have boredom. We're going to be in the boredom zone. If we have very low challenge and high support, we're going to be in the comfort zone. But comfort zone does not necessarily mean that learning is happening. But if we have very high support and very high challenge, but low support, we're going to have frustration and anxiety. And that, as I was saying in the morning, these quadrants have to be in our lesson plan, because the ideal quadrant is the one with high support and high challenge. This also has to do with maybe what Krashen says about I+1, right? Input, but with a little challenge that is manageable. And this quadrant is the quadrant in which we have the learning and engagement zone. And this is the essential technique for us teachers to consider all the time. We are in the zone of proximal development. That's what Vygotsky says. And that's where learning does happen. And that's what's important to us. So that's what we have to consider when we plan our lessons and plan our activities and tasks and so on and so forth. So always think of how much support you're giving and how much challenge you're giving your students. And this only comes with experience. But I think as human beings, all of us in a way, I mean, even if you're a native speaker of the language you're teaching, somehow people around you have had to scaffold learning for you, whether it was the language itself, because that's what happens when we're kids. We scaffold the language for kids to learn their L1 anyway. So we're not new to this. This has happened and has been happening in our lives. Now, scaffolding, according to Thornberry, is this temporary support that surrounds a building under construction, right? That's the, after all, that's the concrete meaning of scaffolding. But the term is used metaphorically to describe this temporary, again, interactional support that we give to learners while they are sort of constructing their own language system. Therefore, it is support, and that we, as I said, that we get from teachers, from parents, from as Thornberry says, better others. And this support enables us to perform any task at a level beyond our present competence, and that's I+1. That's the zone of proximal development, and that's something that has to be implemented all the time in every class, and therefore in every lesson plan. Language scaffolding, I'm not going to go into details about each one of them, but the literature says that there are basically three kinds of scaffolding vis-a-vis language learning. There is verbal scaffolding, there's procedural scaffolding, and there is this instructional scaffolding. All of them related to comprehension or production. So we have verbal scaffolding for comprehension, and we have verbal scaffolding for production. Again, this is related to the receptive skills and the productive skills. So we have scaffolding, three kinds or three types, as the literature usually mentions, of scaffolding related to comprehension and production. I'll give you reference to go deeper into this. This is really, really interesting. But scaffolding, to be engaging, because I think you remember the quadrant where you have the high support and high challenge is engaging if you have both of the levels of high support and high challenge really well calibrated. But the thing is, it should be as close to real life as possible. I mean, which of the pictures do you think is really going to make this person learn how to swim, right? I mean, the first one, the person may even at the beginning make an effort to learn, but the real situations are not being rehearsed. We're not really rehearsing what is going to be real after we leave that context, right? I always say that the classroom is this wonderful opportunity for rehearsal, in the sense that it's like dress rehearsal, right? Or some kind of rehearsal when we think of theater, the theater, for example, so that in that sense, we're preparing our students to actually be real actors in real life, the rehearsal is happening in our classrooms. But rehearsal should be as close as possible to reality. So it should be some kind of dress rehearsal after all. So I mean, you have to choose between the artificial use of language and a more natural use of language. Of course, the classroom is not a natural environment and for language learning, but it is up to us to plan and make decisions about the way things are going to happen in a way to make that situation as close as possible to reality. And what the literature says, and there's a lot written about scaffolding, the effective scaffolded learning involves a few characteristics which would fit into each of the categories that I mentioned: verbal scaffolding, procedural, and instructional. I'm going to actually, I have a mishmash of all of them here because in the time we have allotted for our conversation, we're not going to go deep into details of separating them. But the first thing that a competent facilitator, a competent teacher has to do is to create interest. And the second thing related to interest is exactly showing interest, because that's what we do in real life. I mean, who is interested in talking to someone who's not interested in the conversation? And who is going to talk about something that they're not interested in? So all this goes back to the very basics of, let's say, any pre-service teaching course, right? We have to develop needs analysis first. We have to know more about our students. We have to know more about their learning preferences. I don't like learning styles very much. I am not very convinced that I know that a lot of people talk about the multiple intelligences. Who am I to dispute anything with Howard Gardner? But let's agree that if there are no multiple intelligences as the absolute truth, and in fact, maybe the absolute truth does not exist in anything after all, and if there are not learning styles that we're born with, there are learning preferences. We decide based on our experiments with language and with learning, we decide on how we want to learn or how we prefer to learn. Therefore, knowing these preferences will make our work much lighter and much more effective. So creating interest and showing interest are the basis of any scaffolding technique we're going to use with our students. Of course, then we have the usual the usual simplification of tasks into more manageable stages. The idea is of course, it's almost like eating anything. It's important to maybe cut things up as much as possible so that you can digest them more effectively, and even chew, so that we don't really bite more than we can chew, or that we don't make our students bite more than they can chew. Therefore, we have to design tasks that build on previous activities. If you were with us here in the morning, I mentioned going from the unknown into, going from the area they know, or the previous knowledge, right, into the new knowledge. So the idea is to build. The idea is always to build, and therefore, again, This has to do with needs analysis, because we have to know where they're coming from, and what they need and what they expect. So all of this is necessary as a foundation for very good scaffolding. Because people normally think that scaffolding is just simplifying things or making things more digestible. That's part of scaffolding. But again, it has a lot to do with interest in both ways. It's a two-way road. Interest from the students, and the teacher showing interest in the students. So then simplifying the tasks, making them more digestible and more manageable, and building on something that they already have, they already know. A few more characteristics of effective scaffolded learning. It's important throughout the procedure to remind the learners of the goals, because sometimes because they are somehow involved with part of the task, they might forget what the real goal is. So here again, we act as the facilitator, always with the goal in mind. And the goal is very important. No human being can tolerate continuous failure. We have to have some successes along the way. We might have some failures, that's okay, but we can't have only failures. And we have to witness our own successes. So it's important to remind them of the goals so that they don't lose themselves along the way. Another very important characteristic is to demonstrate the tasks or parts of the tasks so that they can, we are models after all, so it's important to expose ourselves. Never ask, I personally hate to ask anyone to do something which I would not do myself. So it's very important to demonstrate the task or the parts of the tasks we are asking them to do. And many times, many times, it's important to explain why. Because there's this sense of, why do I have to do this? Why should I want to do this? That, again, builds the relationship and builds credibility and builds trust. Again, a very important and sometimes very abstract part of scaffolding. I always say, scaffolding is more or less like trying to help someone who is blindfolded to cross the street, for example. I mean, if you were with me near an avenue, a very busy avenue, and we have to cross the avenue, and if I ask you, please close your eyes and give me your hand, would you? That's more or less what we're doing every day with our students, right? Close your eyes and give me your hand. We're going to cross this very busy street. There is danger here. Which is the danger in our case? The danger of not learning, the danger of having failure, the danger of feeling frustrated. It's not the danger of being hit by a car, but it can be very tragic and frustrating not to reach the goal. So it's very important to build this trust through scaffolding. So therefore, it's important to demonstrate and explain why those steps are important. And it's also very important to provide constructive but genuine feedback. Sometimes we become too mechanical, and I'm talking about myself, not necessarily about you. We have to pay attention to our teacher talk. Sometimes we say good, okay, very good, excellent, just mechanically. I mean, praise has to be genuine for it to be constructive. So pay attention to your teacher talk. Pay attention to how mechanical your praise or your constructive feedback has become. There is a tendency for that to happen. Many of us say good morning to everyone. Do we really wish, when we say good morning to someone, do we really wish um, I wish you will have a really good morning, or we just say it as a formula, right? Let me see what's in the chat here. Should feedback be delivered soon after a task? After a task come to an end, could you suggest us? Okay, well, feedback is another aspect that has to be felt. I mean, there is the right time. There is this right time, but there's no recipe for that. I mean, and this has to do with the next characteristic I'm going to mention: reducing frustration as much as possible. While students are performing the task, we have to pay attention to the ones that are being successful in the process and the ones that are actually having a hard time with the process. But the important thing is not to provide them with the answer. The important thing is to maybe, again, maybe the way you designed the task did not really cater for everyone's needs. And this may happen. Because, I mean, in a classroom, we have different personalities. We'd have different moods, maybe on a certain day. But for example, let's suppose the person cannot find the word or cannot actually fill in the gap that was supposed to be filled in. Maybe you can give the first letter. You can give him or her, 3 options. So you're trying to reduce frustration here. You're not giving the answer. You're, again, re-simplifying the task for that student. In a way, this has to do with, I had the immense pleasure of watching a presentation by Penny Orr recently. And she talked about 2 things that we certainly have to consider again in language teaching, and the pandemic also helped us with that. Individualization and personalization, right? We have to try. I'm not saying it's possible to do it all the time, every minute of your class, but how much individualization are you providing, and how much personalization are you providing in your lesson plan, right? So the real question is, how much engagement are you getting? I know that ideal situations in education are not necessarily present all the time, but the thing is not always whether we get there all the time. The question, the burning question, is always, do we try to get there? That's the point, right? So my answer to the question that was in the chat box was, I mean, there's not a specific or maybe right time for feedback, but there is certainly after. I mean, the feedback after the task is finished is necessary. But feedback, you might have small bits of feedback in order to reduce frustration, and again to remind the learners of their goals. This is excellent because you're encouraging them. A few more characteristics. I mean, when you think of scaffolding, I mean, sometimes people take scaffolding very lightly, but there is so much, maybe how we see scaffolding in our everyday life as teachers is just the tip of the iceberg, really, because there's so much more there. And there's so much more in relation to real learning really taking place. So again, a few other characteristics of effective scaffolded learning: expressing the same idea in more than one way. Isn't that what we do with children? But maybe when we get teenagers and adults learning their L2, we have to do the same thing. We have to express the same idea in more than one way, just to guarantee. And of course, then you will have your concept checking questions. You will have your instruction checking questions, your ICQs, your CCQs. But that's it. Through your ICQs and your CCQs, maybe you will discover that you have to express things I mean, the same things in more than one way. And these are things that we plan for. These are things that should be in our lesson plan. So if through my CCQs and my ICQs, I actually see that the students did not really grasp the main objective, the main idea of the task, I have to express that in a different way. And I mean, sometimes we have to do it on the spur of the moment. We have to improvise, but it is always good as competent professionals to include that in our lesson plan. Of course, using visuals, realia, gestures, etc., everything that can help us. Usually people normally think of scaffolding only, we reduce scaffolding to this in general, right? Or maybe what comes next, using word banks, glossaries, sentence substitution tables, or sentence stems and writing frames. These two are very important, and they are actually part of those three categories I mentioned, right? But as I said, there's more to that, because I mean, if we give students the word banks, but we don't explain what they're going to do with them, we don't explain why this is going to help, why, what's the purpose of doing that? Maybe they won't do it anyway, or they won't be engaged. And learning happens through engagement. The other thing, providing model text, the same thing. So these three, using visuals, using word banks, and using model text, are basically instruments, tools that all of us use for scaffolding. But there's more to it, as you can see from the previous slides and the one that's is coming. In fact, the last one on this slide is also very important. Keeping reasonable wait time. I've caught myself several times, asking a question and not giving students any time to muster up the courage, maybe, or to actually think about the answer. Maybe because teachers in general are afraid of silence in the classroom, right? Maybe when nobody's answering, and this has become even more apparent online, right? Especially when the cameras are closed. It's incredible how, I mean, this is dreadful to all of us. But silence might be the moment the students need to, as I said, muster up the courage and even have some time to think. Don't we need some time to think? I mean, didn't we plan our lesson? Maybe we just look like maybe a machine gun, right? A teaching machine gun, just because we have had time to think. We have had time to rehearse. They're having their time to rehearse, and wait time is very important in order, again, not to overload the students with maybe unreal expectations. A few more characteristics, and these are very, very important. Also for building trust and for building, as another concept that we talk a lot, and we've been talking a lot for decades, the optimal learning climate in the classroom, so that we don't, raise the affective filter. It's important to encourage the learner to continue with what one of the experts in this field says: brief conversation oiling questions, right? Conversation oiling questions look like, really? Did you? Is it? Tell me more. So this is important, because this will give us the idea that of one of the first things I mentioned on one of the slides. We show interest. We show genuine interest. The other very important thing is an obtrusively saying the correct form or pronunciation. We don't let necessarily slips or mistakes go by. It's important. This is part of scaffolding. Correction is part of scaffolding, but we should do it in a way that does not hinder or make the learner stop, and therefore give up the whole learning process. The same. So it's okay. I'll give you some examples in a few minutes. Unobtrusively to give the word or phrase the learner is looking for, but there's wait time. We wait first. Otherwise, we are giving, again, we go back to the quadrants. Maybe we're giving high challenge, but maybe we're giving the wrong level of support. We're giving too much support, and this again does not generate engagement, therefore does not generate learning. And avoid using only display questions. Are you familiar with the term display questions? Display questions are those questions that do not really represent real life. They are just examples in order to practice something. For example, if I hold my hand like this and I say, how many fingers have I got, right? How many fingers have I got? I mean, I know the answer and you know the answer, either in Portuguese or in English. Maybe you don't write whichever language you're talking about. Couldn't I ask something like, how many sisters have you got? How many cats have you got? How many dogs have you got? Something that something that I don't know and can show genuine interest in. And the student will be interested in talking about, because that's something that they that will individualize learning and personalize learning, right? Therefore, I'm not saying that display questions should be abolished. I'm just saying that it's important for us to analyze our own teacher talk, our own discourse, right? Do I use only display questions? And with display questions, normally we use the IRE or RIF pattern. The literature mentions both the interaction, the initiative, right? The response, and the evaluation or feedback. So if I ask, we read a text, and the answer is in the text, right? I mean, who is the text about? And of course, there was the title there, Abraham Lincoln. And then the student says Abraham Lincoln. And so initiate the conversation, but again, with sometimes a display question, then a response, and then I say, good. Just because, what kind of praise is this? Because it was obvious that the answer, the student would answer correctly, right? So I'm not saying that the IRE pattern is wrong. I'm not saying that display questions are wrong. I'm just saying that, do we use in our discourse, in our classroom discourse, do we use only this? This does not make genuine conversation. And without genuine conversation, we're not rehearsing for real life. And therefore, with all this, we must treat learners as worthy conversational partners. And more than treating them like that, they have to feel that we consider them worthy conversational partners. Worthy conversational partners, regardless of the age. You may be teaching early childhood education, and you may be teaching adults, you may be teaching teenagers. Everyone feels when you're interested in them, when you're interested in their conversation. So they feel that they are worthy conversational partners. you know, this has popped up several times, many times when we're going to replace, when we're going to substitute for a peer. It's very easy for the person who is substituting to be sometimes more flexible about making the students talk. And usually we hear, "Oh, can't you come? Aren't you going to come back?" And in general, when we ask why, is there's this feeling, you know, oh, maybe because you talk to us more than our teacher, because the teacher has to maybe they have to follow a schedule, they have to follow, you know, there are a certain number of classes and so much to cover, and I know how these things are. But it's not because we did anything that the other teacher could not do. It's just that because we're substituting, sometimes we actually pay more attention. We're genuinely interested in them because they're new to us and we're new to them. And they feel like they are worthy conversational partners. I tried to put all of these characteristics of scaffolding together. I got them from several sources, which I will mention. I will mention 3, but I actually used many more, maybe 7 or 8 sources related to scaffolding, language scaffolding. So this brings me to an example that I actually got from Scott Thornberry, yeah. So we have a script here. This is rather embarrassing, I mean, to read the script, but it's important to make some points here. This is an elementary class in Spain, and they have been working on the language of making suggestions. So student 1 says, "What about go to the mountains? What about?" So look, unobtrusively correcting, right? Trying to make the student, so we're actually throwing back the question to see if this is a slip, this is an error, whatever, but the student was able to correct himself. I had a very good friend who used to say that to err is human, to self-correct divine. And this is the opportunity we give to students with scaffolding, right? With techniques that help them learn their own, learn in their own rhythm, right? What about going to the mountains? We can do barranking, and students laugh because barranking is, you know, the person is usually a Spanish word and actually translating without any, I mean, giving any thoughts to it and just adapting really the words to English. What's barranking? Okay, you see, she or he here, the teacher is genuinely interested, especially because he or she did not understand. Is a sport, yes, but what do you do exactly? So, okay, keep asking. You have a river, a small river, and gestures, of course. This is an elementary class. And then goes down because of the gestures, goes down. Yes, as a cataract. Okay, cataract, we know that in English, it's not what the student really meant, right? Okay, a waterfall writes on the board. So, okay, so the teacher is teaching here, right? But there is teaching and conversation, more genuine, more real swimming here than just asking a question about the text that they've just read and asking factual questions about the text. So a waterfall writes it on the board. What's a waterfall, Manel? Right? Can you give me an example? Eliciting, right? So eliciting is of course part of scaffolding. A famous waterfall draws, okay, using all sorts of scaffolding techniques here, right? Like Niagara, the student answers or questions. Okay, so she knows, through the eliciting procedure here, the teacher knows that the students understood it. So what do you do with the waterfall? You go down. What? In a boat? So keeps asking questions. No, with ¿cómo se dice cuerda? And one student suggests cord, and then the teacher again. No, I wouldn't use no, but I would say rope. A cord is smaller, like at the window. Look, and then points. So visuals, right? Gestures, drawings. Rope. You go down. Rope in waterfall. Okay, this is an elementary class, right? Okay, now look at this. You wear black clothes, special clothes, and then the teacher repeats because of the pronunciation problem. Special clothes, unobtrusively. Repeat. Okay, so correcting. Student repeats. This sounds dangerous. Is it dangerous? Again, questions to keep going and teaching. No. Is in summer. No much water. Sorry, no much water, because of course the teacher wanted some better kind of sentence here. Sorry, poco, little water. River is not strong. Okay, and you have done this? Okay, so interested, genuinely interested in the student. What's it called in Spanish? Barranquismo. In English? I don't know. No problem. The teacher does not know. Okay. But conversation, more real swimming actually happened here. I'll have to ask somebody. No problem. It's good. You come? Let's go together. And the teacher says, I don't think so. And there's laughter, right? So here's a very good example of teacher talk and teacher discourse that actually promotes scaffolding through real swimming, real practice, real, rehearsal that really resembles real life. Now I'm going to give you some examples of redesigning a task or designing a task in order to scaffold reading and listening, for example. Here you have an authentic version of the Socratic method, right? So it's a more challenging extract of a text that the students will be reading. What can we do here? Pre-teach vocabulary, that's one thing, yeah, but then pre-teaching many times involves student teacher talking time, so it's sort of teacher-centered. One idea, which is very simple, but sometimes it doesn't occur to us because sometimes we are slaves in relation to the textbook, to the course book. Remember, the course book is our slave. It's not the other way around. We can have a simplified version, a graded version of the same text. Sometimes because we have to explain more, it's going to be a bit longer. It can be only part of the text, the part that would probably bring more difficulty to the students. And then the students will compare the texts and find the synonyms or synonymous expressions together in pairs, for example, in small groups. And then they can actually, instead of just getting the vocabulary, the words in the authentic version, they will actually be dealing with something real, another text, but a simplified version of the text that is sort of explaining the meaning of certain difficult terms or difficult constructions, difficult structures, or more complex, not necessarily difficult, but more complex structure. For example, maybe they don't know the word seeking, right? But then if we have that helped, his purpose was to show his students mistakes. So seeking to expose contradictions in the students' thoughts, right? So the students are able to compare and contrast here. right? Okay, another example here is, for example, if they're going to watch a video, you can prepare some of the sentences of the video and have that open-ended so that they will complete based on context. And then this will make it easier for them to understand, to watch. When they are watching the video, they will be able to understand more of the video, right? And this will generate also conversation when they compare their answers. So these are two very simple examples that I'm sure you could think of. And actually, I didn't think of this. This is taken from other materials that cover the idea of scaffolding. Let me give, I'm going to skip this. The idea then with scaffolding is more or less like this illustration here. The mother is helping the child learn how to ride a bicycle. Initially, the mother is holding the child and the bicycle so that progressively she will let the child ride the bicycle by herself in this case. So the process of learning and teaching is a process that goes from other regulation to self-regulation. I many years ago, when I was a very young teacher, I heard a sentence, and I have never forgotten it. A good teacher makes himself or herself progressively unnecessary. I will repeat it. A good teacher makes himself or herself progressively unnecessary. Okay, now, more than meets the eye. Please, this is a very short video. Bear with me. I think we have a very important message here.
I have a lot of memories from when I was a child. One that's always stuck out to me, though, was when I was about 10 years old, and I was in school, and I struggled. And I didn't struggle with English, math, or science. I struggled holding still. And I would try to listen and focus and process ideas, but I couldn't help myself. And to be honest, I would sit there and then I would just start tapping. And the students in the class would look at me and they'd say, "Hey, stop tapping." A lot of the time, I didn't even realize I was doing it. And then eventually even the teachers got after me and they would yell at me and they'd say, "Clint, you have to stop tapping." It got so bad that I got sent to the principal's office for tapping. And he said to me, "Okay, maybe when you go back to class, just try sitting on your hands." So I did. I went back to class, and when I felt myself starting to tap, I did this. I sat on my hands. And that worked for about 5 seconds. One time I was tapping in class, and my teacher, Mr. Jensen, looked at me and he yelled. And he said, "Clint, stay after class." And I thought to myself, this is it. I am done. Now, I've always been the type of person that believes that a single moment in time can change a person's life. And this was one of those moments for me. And I will never forget it. So I was sitting there with Mr. Jensen and an empty classroom. He walked past me and he sat next to his desk and he said, "Clint, come here. I want to talk to you." And as he looked me right in the eye, he said, "Now, I need you to know something. You're not in trouble. But I do have just one question that I have to ask you." And he asked, he said, "Have you ever thought about playing the drums?" And in that moment, Mr. Jensen, he leaned back and he opened the top drawer of his desk. And he reached in and he pulled out my very first pair of drumsticks. And he held them in his hands and he looked at me and he said, "Hey, Clint, you're not a problem. I think you're a drummer." From that moment on, I've never put those sticks down. I've toured, recorded, and played drums all over the world. My whole college education was paid for with drumsticks in my hand. Just because of a single moment in time when somebody believed in me and he saw something in me that I didn't even see within myself. And from that moment, I learned that there's a difference between being the best in the world and being the best for the world.
Okay, I think this sums it up. If some students are unresponsive, maybe you can't teach them yet, but you can love them. And if you love them today, maybe you can teach them tomorrow. These are some of the references that I used. There's this excellent book by Joan Ken-Shing, published by NGL, Teaching Young Learners. She has a very good part about scaffolding in the book, of course, with lots of other brilliant ideas. There is also this book by Pauline Gibbons, Scaffolding Language and Scaffolding Learning. And there is also this excellent book about scaffolding language development in immersion and dual language classrooms. I used some other books, but these are, I would say, my favorites. I will skip this because I don't think we have time. I can only thank again National Geographic Learning for the trust. I hope I was able to live up to the expectations. My final message is this: let's keep trying to be the best, not in the world, but for the world.
What would you think if I sang out a tune? Would you stand up and walk out on me?
These are my contacts. As I said in the morning, I don't use Facebook or Instagram so much. If you want to contact me, you have my email address, my phone number here in Brazil, and also I use LinkedIn quite a lot. So if you look me up, you will find me. Again, thank you for your precious time. Human beings don't have any other thing that is more precious than their time, because that means their existence on this planet. So you've given me some of your treasure, your time. Thank you very much. Thanks, SBS. Rafael?